Good morning. So I've got a little problem with this, with my container project, besides the mess here. Sorry about that. I've added a small 4-panel array. This is a EG4 rack mount. It's very nicely built, easy to install. I'm putting it, normally you'd be sitting on concrete piers, but I built a steel rack for it because this is actually probably the leach field for my septic system. And I wired it over here to a cutoff switch. So my problem is it's putting out about 150 volts with 4 panels. Those are 370 watt Aptos panels, and and it's not stable. This, by the way, is the new rack I've just built to add to the edge of the container, and this will hold 10 of the Aptos panels, which is almost all of my remaining pallet of panels. And that will kind of finish the edge mounted solar panels for the solar rack. But anyway, getting back to my current problem, this little rack is putting out roughly, well, it's 4 panels and they are 370 watts. So in theory, somewhere around 1200 watts. In practice, it's almost no watts. Well, it varies. It may get up to about 800 and then drop down to about 10 or 12 watts. It's unstable. I think the voltage is just too low for the MPPT to lock reliably, which is disappointing. The MPPT is actually supposed to work down to around 120 volts or maybe 140. But anyway, so I'm going to make another rack to carry 3 or 4 panels, and I'm going to make it out of some salvaged pipe that I have. And if you think the mess where the container is bad, you should see my shop. But anyway, this is the pipe I'm making it out of. This was salvaged from a cold storage warehouse that was dismantled. So I bought some of the pipe. It was cheap, and it's about 2 1/4 inch pipe, thick wall, high pressure. And I've got some other steel left over from previous projects that I'm going to use to build the base of the rack. And like the rack that's already out there with the EG4, I stabilized it by stacking. Oh, this is kind of dizzying. Sorry about that. I stabilized it by stacking a bunch of offcuts of granite and marble. This place used to be a granite and marble cutting shop, and there's another chunk of that pipe. I'm going to make a much bigger rack later. So I do metal work in this shop. I'm not great at it, but I'm okay at it. So here's the panels. I'm going to build a rack that will ultimately hold 3 of the panels. So it'll raise the number of panels on that rack out there to 7. Which would be somewhere around 300 volts, which should make it happy. But I want to see if just 1 panel will stabilize it. You know, just bringing it up to 5, which would bring it closer to 200 volts and should be stable. And that would tell me whether or not the problem is there or if I have some other deeper problem. So I'm making the rack by, I've taken a hole saw and cut these tubes so that they can be welded together to form a U-shaped rack. And then I'm just going to use some cheap muffler clamps to clamp superstrut to it. Superstrut is the 1 5/8" deep version, heavier gauge version of unistrut. Unistrut's usually about 5/8 of an inch deep and fairly light gauge. Superstrut is a lot stronger. I'm going to use some 10-foot sections of superstrut. Okay, presto, here's the rack. So, and there's some superstrut laying on the floor there. So I'm using 10-foot sections. The panels are 41 inches wide, and if you divide 120 inches by which is 12 feet, by 31, you get, oops, not quite enough. It's about 5 inches short, so I have to make a little addition to the rack, about a 5-inch long addition to the rack. I'm gonna do that in a kind of weird way. I mean, there are splices available for this stuff, but the splices are crazy expensive. They're like 20 bucks a piece, and really there's nothing much to them. So I'm just going to make the extensions by taking some scrap unistrut and just welding it together. So here's the unistrut on the rack, bolted to it. One of the problems of doing anything with this stuff is the biggest deep well socket you can get down in there is a 9/16 socket, which means 3/8 bolts. I'd like to use something a little heavier, but 3/8 is adequate, especially with the muffler bracket design, which has both a U bolt and a metal piece that makes it flat across the top. So this is ready to go. This kind of works, and I haven't tightened them down too much, so I can move them around. I'm going to use that when I make the extension. I'm going to take I have another piece of unistrut that I don't have a particular use for, that I'm going to make a ledger for the bottom, just to make it easier to mount the panels. And the net will be somewhere, as I say, somewhere around 200 volts. But I'm going to add just one panel at first, which will add another somewhere between 35 and 40 volts to the system, and should show me whether or not the MPPT is just screwing up, or it's just unstable with just 150 volts on it. So that's what we're doing. So you can see the width of these legs. You might think that that's stable enough as it is, but we get some pretty strong wind here. So I'm going to do the same thing that I did with the other rack, which is dump a bunch of scrap marble and granite on top of the legs, which is what I've already done with this wider frame. This is kind of a common way of doing this kind of stuff. You could just put a fabric, like a road cloth across the top of it and dump gravel on it, and that would make it quite sturdy. But there's probably 300-400 pounds of marble and granite sitting on there, and this rack has been sitting here for a month or so, and it's doing fine. So I'm reasonably happy with that, and I think it's going to work just fine for the other one. And I've got lots of scrap marble and granite. So here's the marble and granite in place, just kind of dumped kind of haphazardly on there, and two panels. So I just temporarily mounted these two panels. I did two of them so that they would sort of balance each other, and I could handle everything a little easier. These end clamps that I'm using here have been panned on in comments as being not very good. I find them to be excellent. They work perfectly with the typical 1 5/8" edge panel. You do have to hold them in place while you're tightening them down, but they're very sturdy. They work with a unistrut, and I see nothing wrong with them. But anyway, so I have connected up this one panel, and indeed the MPPT is now perfectly stable. The voltage isn't varying. It's putting out somewhere around, and this is late afternoon sun, so it's not particularly potent, but it's putting out somewhere around 800 watts for these panels. So I'm satisfied that I have indeed found the problem, and now I'm going to work on mounting 3 instead of just 2 panels, which means it looks like I've got plenty of room there, but I don't. It's like I say, it's 5 inches short of the full width for 3 panels. This method of using pipe clamps is something that, or muffler clamps, I should say, is something that I've seen other places. There's some people selling mounting kits based on what looked to me like just regular muffler clamps, but they charge quite a bit of money for them. They don't supply the pipe; they supply a part that's kind of clumsily made that goes onto a piece of wood. Pressure treated wood that you'd put into the ground, and then you put a cap on it that connects to the pipe, and then the muffler clamps, and they charge an arm and a leg for them. And I guess I don't have objection to somebody making a profit with a good idea, but I will say that it's not particularly difficult to make these, and these clamps. These muffler clamps cost about $7 or $8. Certainly not hundreds of dollars, which is what the mounting system sells for. So I've completed as I said, I didn't buy the splices. I just took scrap pieces of superstrut, turned them upside down and bolted them to the ends, and then bolted extensions onto the top of that. I actually wound up welding it because I can, more than anything else. But it's perfectly feasible to do it without any welding. You could just bolt them together, and of course one of the problem is the largest socket you'll be able to get down in between those rails of the superstrut is a 9/16 extended socket, so that means a 3/8 bolt, which is a little small. You'll have to use some washers to make certain the bolts don't get pulled through the hole. But other than that, it works fine, and it's just scrap. So that was the way I chose to go.